Welcome to the Spark Konnect podcast. Today's guest is an instructional designer, author, artist, and plein air painter, Julie Dirksen. And this conversation felt like such a beautiful blend of creativity, observation, learning, and humanity. Julie shares how painting has changed the way she sees the world. And honestly, the way she describes observation completely fascinated me. At one point, she talks about squinting while looking at a subject so you can stop seeing what you think is there and start seeing what's actually there. I love that idea so much because it connects not only to art, but also to learning, facilitation, and the way we experience other people. We also explore creativity, experimentation, feedback, curiosity, and the surprising parallels between being an artist and being an instructional designer. Julie has such a grounded and thoughtful way of talking about learning and growth, and I think you're going to feel inspired by her perspective. This episode is reflective, creative, and full of those little moments that make you pause and notice things differently. Enjoy my conversation with Julie Dirksen. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Spark Konnect. I've got Julie Dirksen here with me today, and I'm actually super excited about it because, A, we've been planning it for a while, Julie. We're finally here. The day has arrived.
Yes.
And also, I think that people aren't going to know what I get to know about you today and what we all get to learn more about. And so without further ado, if you could introduce yourself officially and formally, what do you do? And also, what is your form of artistry?
Yeah. So I am an instructional designer from way back. People probably know me best from some of the books that I've written. Design for How People Learn is far and away the best known book, but I also have Talk to the Elephant, Design Learning for Behavior Change. And I'm in the final bits of writing a new book on design for how people build skills. So which has actually been really interesting because I've been looking a lot at things like how do people get better at art, or how do people get better at sports, or how do people get better at a lot of these disciplines where we have sort of different practices around it than we do in a lot of kind of cognitive skills or workplace skills. And so from an art point of view, I paint, and I've been a painter for, well, I don't know how long I've been a painter. That sounds very official, but I've been painting for probably 30 plus years now or something like that. And it's very much my like retreat thing. Like my favorite thing to do is to go do like a plein air workshop someplace outside and sit outside and paint landscapes because it's so anti-digital in terms of an activity where you're just mixing colors and looking at the scenery and being in nature and figuring out how the shapes go together and things like that. And it's a completely analog activity. It's a completely non-digital activity. And I really, not that you can't do amazing things with digital art, but the reason one of the reasons I love it as much as I do is because it's kind of that break for your brain from the screens and reading and cognition and thinking. And instead you're just like, what color blue do I like for this? Or, things like that. So.
And it's so classic. So just so many things going on. So plein air or plein air?
Plein air, yeah.
Plein air.
Your pronunciation's better than mine.
No, I was like, how do I pronounce that? And I was going to ask you. So I'm glad that you're doing that. But it's when you think of a painter, it is the classic image, I think, that pops up in your mind of what a painter is. For me, it's the first one, somebody sitting outside painting what's happening outside. The second one is probably Jackson Pollock inside of a studio and it going wild.
Yeah. Paint spatters and whatnot. Sure.
Yeah. That is so cool. And I just remember when I first found out that you do this, it was a friend told us. We have a mutual friends. We were at an event someplace and they said, Julie paints. And I said, no, I don't know that Julie paints. Why would I know that? That is the coolest thing. And I think it's so interesting too, because it makes a whole lot of sense. So tell us about it. Like you said, you've been doing it about 30 years. How did you get started? Yeah.
You just take art classes and things like that. I mean, I took some art classes in college, and we were talking a little bit before we got started about, the kind of whole question of talent.
Yeah.
And, it's been one of the things where I seem to have some aptitude for it. Like I seem to have, although I'm very much a believer in like everybody can be an artist. There's a book which actually would fit, I think, well within the kind of bigger picture of what you're doing. Have you ever seen Orbiting the Giant Hairball?
No, what is this one?
Okay, yeah, this is a book you need
Okay.
to pick up some time. It was a guy who was an artist for, I think, Hallmark Cards, one of the large card companies. I think it was Hallmark, but I could be wrong. And he talked about how like corporate America was like a big hairball, and if you got caught up in it, it was gonna kind of chew you up, especially as an artist. But that if you could learn how to orbit the giant hairball, you could have a really nice career.
This sounds like exactly what I need to be reading, and also because of the cat reference, I'm already all
Yes.
in.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had this really lovely passage in there where he would talk about like he would do workshops with kids and stuff. And if you go in, and he's not the only one who said this, but it's the first place I encountered it, where he would go into a class of like 5 or 6 year olds and he'd be like, "Who's an artist?" And everybody's like, "Me." And then he'd go into a class of like 9 year olds and he'd be like, "Who's an artist?" And they'd be like, "Some of us." And then he'd go into a class of like teenagers and there'd be like 3. And he's like, what happens? Why did this sort of belief change
Yeah.
about who could be an artist? And the whole idea that like, oh, I'm not talented or I can't draw or, any of those kinds of things. I very much believe that like anybody can, and, some guidance and things like that. Like drawing on the right side of the brain is right side, left side, whichever side it is. I get those confused because it's not real. Like
Right,
there's
'cause
no
I think it's
there's
drawing on
no
the right side
legitimacy
of the
to the
brain
right
is
brain,
the
left brain thing, and so I
I
can never
know.
remember which side is which.
I think the publication is right side of the brain.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of it is about, like, tricking yourself into seeing what it really is, not what you think it should be. So, like, if you picture a daisy in your head, you're picturing, like, this thing facing you with, like, 5 petals, you can see all of them clearly, all this kinda stuff, like a daisy, like somebody would draw it on like a kid would draw it on a paper or something like that. But if you are painting a daisy in the real world, like, one petal's kinda flipped over and it's kinda angled, and so it's not perfectly round, and the yellow part is actually kind of more like a sort of broken oval and, like all of these kinds of things. And so tricking your brain into not seeing the, the image of what a daisy is supposed to be in your head and actually looking and going, what is that shape and how do I make it? Like that's part of it, which I think since we're relating this back, like that I think is an interesting skill to bring back to other domains, which is how do I not see what I think I'm supposed to be seeing? How do I, genuinely unpack what this really is or
What
what's really
is
going on? Not what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, because how often are we moving through the world saying, "This is what I see," or "What I think I should see," or "What I think I should be,"
Yeah.
rather than allowing what is to be what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we all have these short brains. I mean, like I've written a whole book on the behavioral science space, and one of the things that happened in that space that most people have kind of acknowledged was the wrong path to go down was this idea of cognitive bias. And cognitive biases can be interesting and can tell you something about how people think, but cognitive biases exist because they're efficient.
Mhm.
So if people jump to a conclusion because of a cognitive bias, it's because most of the time when they jump to the conclusion, it's just a way to shortcut a bunch of stuff they don't really need to spend time doing. And we can find those cognitive biases if we ask really tricky questions that expose where this like pattern of thinking is. But the pattern of thinking exists because it's a cognitive efficiency, because it makes things faster or easier, whatever. And so kind of being like, well, you're biased. Well, that's not kind of approaching it with that same level of curiosity of like, well, what's going on here and why did this bias exist? And how is it functional in a lot of cases? Because a lot of the trick there is being able to tell like, okay, this is a functional bias a lot of the time, but it's not functional over here. Right, here's where it goes wrong, and it
Mhm.
can go really wrong, right? So, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine about healthcare stuff and places where, like, the person knew they had, like, a serious health issue, but the medical people were sort of disregarding it until it got really serious.
Yeah.
We're talking about a couple of examples of those, which is an example of a cognitive bias, right? Like, I've heard a lot of people complain about this a bunch of times, and it's usually nothing, and then all of a sudden, it's not nothing, but they're kind of in autopilot mode because they're all crazy overworked and, having to get so much done in the time and,
Right. The
so
efficiency
rushed
side is
that
taken over.
yeah, that
The
we're not
word bias
stopping.
is so interesting. The word bias is so full of bias. It's an interesting bias. We have a bunch of bias about what bias means.
Yeah, it's full of judgment. It's like you if you were biased, you were bad. Well, it's like, no, this
Actually,
bias exists because it was useful and functional a lot of the time.
mm,
But being able to sort of stop yourself and unpack that can be very useful to kind of go, well, if something's not going well here that we're trying to fix, what automatic things, biases for, which is not really the right word, but here we are. Like, what about the system was creating, this bias, and being able to kind of stop yourself and not jump to the conclusions about it, I think is actually one of these really sort of powerful skills
yeah.
as designers that we need to have. And I think that's very much what a lot of the active like painting and art is not assuming that house should be a cube, or not assuming that daisy should be, round circle, or not assuming, like being able to like paint what's actually there and look at it in a way that you can, like, one of the tricks you do when you're painting is you squint.
Cool. I was
Because
just
if
gonna ask
I'm
you, how do we do this? How can I get better at seeing what is there
yeah,
and going for that instead of filling it in with what I think it should be, or filling it in with, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this right no matter what I do. There's that
yeah,
too, isn't there?
yeah, because in painting, like I said, you squint. Because if I'm looking at this landscape, right, I've got this idea that mountains are shaped like this and trees are shaped like this and all this kind of stuff. But what you do, one of the tricks you do is you squint so that it gets blurry, and then you say, "What is that shape?" I think that shape should be like this pine tree where it's, a like, cone shape, pointy at the top, except when I look at it, actually, it's more like, a parallelogram or something, like it's this different shape than what a pine tree is supposed to be because of the way it's interacting with the landscape or whatever it is. But then I can go, okay, there's a blob that's this kind of dark green. And if I'm squinting at it, I'm not thinking it's a tree, it should look like a tree. I'm just going, what is that shape, and what color is it, and what shape is it, and how does it react to the other shapes around it? And so you deliberately try to like disconnect, your vision from what shapes are supposed to be like, to just, if they're just blurry, then it's just a neutral shape. And then I can think about how do I want to translate that to the canvas and things like that. And so
Yeah.
with things in the real world, I think there's an element of, like I said, the question that I often ask is like, what about the system is causing this quote unquote bias to happen? Like,
Which
there's a
is you
reason this
effectively
exists.
squinting at the system, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if you can view it without judgment, this if people are doing this wrong, there's a quote, and it gets attributed to Edward Deming, but the attribution's a little murky, but it's like every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. And so if the system is creating this result, what is it about the system that's creating this result? If we're assuming it isn't just people are lazy, or people are careless, or people don't pay attention. I mean, those things may be true, but they're not helpful, right? Like, there's a
Yeah.
reason that they're not allocating their attention to this thing, or there's a reason they're not being careful about stuff. What is it? Sometimes it's their experiences. I've done this a million times and it's always been fine until it's not fine. And then, something catastrophic can happen. But that's a really tough one to undo because people have all this experience of getting away with it. And just telling them you're not always going to get away with it isn't enough to really believe that you're not always going to get away with it, because
Right. You
it
got
sure
more
feels
evidence
like you
that you
are.
have. So,
Yeah.
wow. See, this is extraordinarily helpful. I think what I love so much about what we're thinking about is how it's all just making perfect sense as I listen to you. And what I mean by it is, of course, painting is a way or a metaphor or an analogy to how we analyze an environment that we're creating as designers and speakers as well.
Hmm.
I love the squinting technique too, because when you did that, I immediately saw the mustache with the guy and the painter and the whole thing, and he's
Yeah,
squinting.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm very visual. I think I get visual learning as a score because that's a real
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've just been working on this book on skills development, and just been writing about, we were chatting about this a little bit before we got started, but the whole
Yeah.
question of talent, which I think is not useful. Like, I don't think it's useful because, talent just means somebody's good at something, and that doesn't really tell you very much about like how they got there. I think the more useful concept is aptitude. So something where, like I have some aptitude for painting. Do I have a lot? I don't know, but I have some, right? But I also will sometimes say I have many talents and none of them are musical. Like I have very little aptitude for anything musical. I do not sing in tune. I played the violin as a kid, and after, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of playing the violin, I still couldn't tune my own violin because I couldn't hear it. Like people
Yeah.
would be like, "You can hear that that's sharp, right?" And I'm like, "No,
No,
no, I
no,
can't."
I don't know what that means. Yeah.
And I have old lady rhythm and I don't know, whatever else. But, like, could I get better at music? Absolutely. Totally could, the fixed versus growth mindset thing. Like, I can have a growth mindset and can I get better at music? Is it worth the effort that I would have to put into it? No, it's not.
Not to
I
you.
will just appreciate and listen to it and
Yeah.
not try to create it. You know, like I
Yeah.
have to pick where I spend my time
I
and
know. We were talking about how this is me. None of my skills include video editing.
right.
It doesn't make any sense to me, and I really am so amazed by the output that people create with such skills that I do not have the aptitude for. I love diving into this talent versus aptitude because the words are oftentimes used interchangeably, and maybe we use talent more than we use aptitude.
Yeah.
And we kind of throw that around. And I was mentioning that talent sort of seems like a born to be thing. And I don't necessarily immediately think about how a person arrived at talent. But when we use the word aptitude, I'm interested in how we arrived and also what more can become.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, I think the word talent really just says you're very good at this. And there was a
Talented.
right, you're talented. But when you say you're talented, you kind of are implying that it was something innate in you, not something that you did to make it happen. And we know that that's not right. We
No.
know that like you have to work at something to be good at it. It doesn't matter. Maybe some people kind of walk into it. Obviously, we've had these children who win Academy Awards or get nominated for Academy Awards for these amazing performances in films, but rarely do those kids go on and, have like the most amazing careers in acting. And there could be a bunch of
Unless
reasons,
they
right? Like,
choose unless they choose to grow and focus on it.
yeah,
You know what's interesting too, Julie, as we were saying this, when I said talent, I was in the born to be mode brain space for a second. But as soon as I said talented, it I switched and started thinking about it differently because if somebody says to you, you're talented, I sort of think that there's it's a different feel than they have talent. I don't know why.
yeah.
It's just weird, just funky putting meaning around, the way we use language. But
Mhm.
aptitude is so interesting. And you mentioned this is what you're diving into in this book that you're writing now. We're going to get another one
Yeah,
soon.
well, it's about skill development, and so I felt like we needed to address the issue of talent somewhere because mostly skill development is treated as a problem of if you work at it and you have deliberate practice and you develop yourself over time, you'll get better at things, and that's largely true. Like that is actually how it works.
I mean, our whole field is called talent development. Are we going to change it? Are you suggesting we should change it to aptitude development? No,
Maybe.
'cause that's a double. I mean, aptitude is develop.
Well, we're using talent as a noun there, and that's a whole different,
It's a whole different
like,
thing.
yeah, you're like the talent,
The talent.
yeah, or something. I don't know. Talent development has always been a wacky
It
phrase.
is
I
wacky
understand
because there is no the aptitude. There's no group of people that are the aptitude.
yeah. But, the like, I could get better at I could get better at music. I could get better at basketball. I could get better at all sorts of things. Is it worth it to me? No, it really isn't. Is it a good investment? And there's the question of do we have an upward limit of how much we can progress with something?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I'm like, could we really get better at basketball? I'm going to put myself right there. I don't think I can get better at basketball.
I'm sure you could get better at basketball. Could you get good at basketball?
Better and good is
You and me
different.
both, probably not. I mean, and literally there's no amount of work we could put in and play in the NBA, right? We're both too short and too probably, too far down along the life path.
Yeah,
Let's put
and
it
I
that
also
way.
tend to cry when I get hurt. So I'm
Yeah,
out.
see, yeah. So we don't, because it's an interesting question between the physical capability and the cognitive or intellectual capability, right? Because brains are more flexible than bodies. We're both too short to play in the WNBA. It literally does not matter how much we would ever practice basketball, or even if we had started practicing basketball when we were, little,
I mean,
I
there
don't
are
remember
like
exactly
Steph
how tall
Curry's
you are,
not
but
real
you're not
tall.
that far off from me, and both of us are too short. Right.
Well, I
So
mean, I don't know. Short's not the only thing. Because what about Steph Curry? He's not that tall compared to
how
the other
tall is
guys.
he though? I don't know.
He's not as tall as the others. I'll look it up while you're talking. But I get
I
your
think
point.
there's still I think there's still a limit,
Yeah,
but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, maybe there's
he's 6'2",
okay.
and
So
so
yeah,
he comes
so
up to his
that's short for an
shoulders.
NBA player,
It's
sure.
small for an NBA player. It's not
Right.
small for a person, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can work around it. But if he was 5'2", do you really think
Yeah, I know. We're
you
in the
know,
5-foot world. That's true. We're not
yeah,
also,
I
I
just
cry a lot, like I said.
so and there's the whole question of kind of like how you move along the path, right? Like so kids that have some initial aptitude are more likely to get the investment, are more likely to get, the attention from coaches or get encouraged to pursue it or get to play more or, or any of those kinds of things. And so there's kind of a cumulative effect to aptitude.
Hmm,
So I do think there's something that's probably innate about that, but talent's not the because if you say you're so talented, like it kind of is almost a little bit dismissive of all the work that you put in.
right. I wonder, as you were talking about kids and the development, I wonder how we can increase our skills as learning and development professionals to be able to identify aptitude in people more effectively. Like how do we do that?
Well, there's a little bit of, we bump into this with a lot of things in our field where in learning and development, we kind of get this weird slim silo of the question. And we're often handed the job of trying to like develop these people who maybe never should have been hired for this job in the first place
That happens a
because,
lot.
yeah. And and our ability to measure aptitude, seems to be not great.
Yeah.
It used to be, can you answer the questions in the interview really well, which is different than often the skill or aptitude that you actually need once people are on the job is,
Yeah.
not their ability to talk about it, but their ability to do it, which, we've tried for years to be like, we need to ask more behavioral based questions and, interviews and things like that. Now it just seems to be how well can you tune your resume for the pattern matching AI to recognize keywords,
Right.
which is not great because everybody's using AI to adapt their resumes and cover letters to the job stuff, which I don't blame anybody for it. I'm sincerely grateful that I'm not job hunting currently because I can't even imagine. But the that ability to actually identify aptitude has proved to be quite elusive for us. I mean, obviously, if you have experience with somebody, if you're managing somebody and you find they've got real aptitude for stuff, like this is how almost everybody winds up in L&D, is they're doing some job. This is not everybody's origin story, but it's a lot of people's origin story, which is, hey, you're a good customer service rep and you seem to help the other customer service reps with stuff. You want to train the customer service reps?
Yeah.
And so we've demonstrated aptitude by being the person who's like figuring stuff out or helping other people or, which makes it a kind of delightful field to work in because we're all a big bunch of helpers, which is how we wound up doing this in the first place. And it means that I think I think we're a nice bunch of people, you
I
know?
always say that whenever I'm at any kind of like local networking event and we talk about what area of businesses we work in, I
Mhm.
often say, I work corporate and I work in learning and development. And they're like, we're sorry you work corporate. Because like a lot of them are makers, right? Or business owners in different ways and stuff,
Yeah.
in local chamber of commerce type things. And I'm always like, no, 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 no. I said learning and development. We're the ones who like hug each other and love each other and help everyone.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And, like, we take great joy from being able to, like, help somebody learn something or do something better, and that's a pretty amazing bunch of people to hang out with.
Yeah.
And so we demonstrated that aptitude in, some job way back when, and that kinda steered us towards the field. And so that's probably how you really do it, how you really recognize, like, aptitude and things like that. Job interviews are not enough.
Yeah.
There's way more important things in terms of how people act rather than what they say and, all of those kinds of pieces, but that's not kinda how the system's always set up.
Yeah, difficult. It plays out over time and through observation of our demonstration, people observing what we've demonstrated. It's interesting, as you mentioned too, because you kind of came like your focus is development, right? In instructional design, right, Julie?
Mhm, yep.
And my side of it is similar in that you were the one who was doing it best. Can you have others do it? And so it comes less from me helping others and the other side of that being you were the one who could talk about it the best. So
Mhm.
could you please talk about it to others?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I
It's
think is
simpler.
its own aptitude and its own
Yeah,
thing, which is how do you translate this for other people? How do you help them understand it? How do
right,
you
and then I happen to like that. It's interesting because I just got done coaching a bunch of speakers for a local Disrupt event, and, there was one speaker who, because as you were talking about aptitude and talent, I keep thinking of her because when she got on the stage the night she finally did it, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, "Okay." She's like 22 years old.
Mm,
You need to do this as part of your entire future. The
right.
way that she showed up on the stage was so it's like what we train people to do for years and years and years. But what's incredible to me about it is less that that happened because it's super cool to see that. What's incredible is that I actually didn't predict it that early.
Interesting.
And I was working with her a lot and I knew, you know, brain-wise creativity and stuff, but I didn't recognize the commitment or the ability for the performance. Didn't
Yeah.
see it in the times that we were practicing and that we were doing things because she didn't actually show up and demonstrate that. But when she went live, I was just kind of like my jaw was on the floor.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited for her actually. Just as we look at this and as I was thinking about how do we identify this aptitude because I would have missed it in her is I guess what I'm getting at
Yeah.
until I saw her do it and then I'm like, "Oh, wait a second." And that, we were together 3 months.
Wow. Yeah.
Like,
No, that's cool though, because there's a phrase, I think it's like luck is, like, oh, I've been super lucky in my career, but they're like, luck is when kind of preparation meets opportunity, where been preparing for it, but then this thing comes along and you're like, oh, I'm ready to do this thing now. And I think there's something similar there, which is, like when aptitude meets, because I mean, I no doubt that like, despite the fact that she sort of didn't demonstrate this kind of spark that you're talking about in practice, the practice and all of the stuff that you did with her were a big piece of what enabled her to step up there and do that.
It was the foundation because and it was I think it's like the moment that we said go and she had to step into all of it together, right? She did it and she delivered. I was blown away. But I was blown away not only because it was so well done, but because I didn't see it at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
moment.
yeah.
I was like, "What happened? How did I miss that it was gonna be that good?"
Right,
I
right,
knew
right.
she was gonna be cool, but, like, yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's
just a little
interesting.
side note of that, her parents were there, and I was like, "This kid's cool. You
Mhm.
need to know mom and dad." Not kid, young woman.
But yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said that, in the book that you're writing 'cause, as we're listening and thinking about the painting, I'm like, "Can we see this anywhere?" You said you've got a little one in there in the new book that'll be out. And how long do we have to wait for your next book? Which all of your books have helped us so much and guided us to be when I think of you, I think about, you know what? If we wanna get it right, we wanna be practical, let's take a look at what Julie has to say about it. So, I'm excited that you've got another one that you're working on. How long do we have to wait? And I hear there's gonna be a painting
Hopefully
of yours in there.
yeah, hopefully it'll be out in the fall.
Oh, great.
I can give you paintings if you wanna put them in the show notes or whatever, that's
No,
fine.
I would love that. I'm sure that all of us would love that for sure.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be out sometime in the fall. I think I'm gonna be done with the first draft by the end of the month. This is
Okay.
May, and that's about what the schedule was with my last book, and I think they had it out in September, but, we've still got a bunch of production work to do on it, so it may push further than that, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I know how it goes.
I'll have a release date hopefully soonish and
Well,
know
that's
kind
great.
of
We'll keep our ears and eyes out for that. I always ask people at the towards the end of the episode to teach us something, which I feel is like funny when it comes to you, because I feel like every time I'm anywhere near you, you have taught me something. And you sort of move through the whole world, like constantly teaching us things. But to get specific, you as a painter, is
Mhm.
there a tip that you could provide us beyond the squinting, which I'm keeping forever, by the way? Or maybe it's a development of the squinting. But as we approach our learning and development efforts, whether that be from design, development, delivery side, speaking side, is there something that you do that comes directly from your painting world as a
No.
painter that we could learn from today and latch on to, if you will?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that there really is this idea that, like, people kind of have a little bit of a self-defeating attitude about art sometimes, like, "Oh, I'm not talented," and things like that, and so I do think it's probably like the Carol Dweck stuff around fixed versus growth mindset. Like, if you have a fixed mindset, which is, "I'm so bad at this," I'm terrible at math, I'm terrible at whatever, I can't do this, any of those kinds of things. So I do think there's always the just start trying to put some marks on the page, or start trying to, you might produce some really interesting things. I'm a big fan in painting of kind of like happy accidents, of when like stop being precious about trying to get it exactly right and put some bold strokes on, and then find what you like in that and then develop it.
Mhm.
And so I think there are some definite things around, if people are interested in something, but they feel like they're not good at it, they might be like your 22-year-old where they've never had, clear evidence that, oh, when you try this, it actually is going to go really well. So I think finding some ways to try things, in a safe environment, but not being quite so concerned about getting it exactly right. I
Yeah.
think that that's really important for developing and for finding creative ideas and for finding new ways of doing things.
Yeah. Oh, it just really resonates. It's like, just give it a go.
Yeah,
Just
right.
give it a go, and, like, you just might surprise yourself. What a lovely message, and something that we can really sit with and give ourselves the space to be imperfect, because nobody's expecting perfect. And in fact, I usually lean in when someone is imperfect and I still see that, yeah, yeah, they're still successful. And I'm like, but you were imperfect and you're still successful. Tell me more.
Yeah,
You know, you too can have
absolutely.
those stories if you follow Julie's advice today. It's
Mhm.
excellent. Ah, well, Julie, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find out what you're up to, and where should they connect with you?
Yeah, my website is usablelearning.com. The books are available there's information about the books on those pages. The books are available pretty much any, kind of major retailer. I also have a website, it's betterlearning.com, where we're going to be putting up some new kind of course materials and learning products over the hopefully next few months. Once the book's done, we'll be getting some stuff up there. So
I love that so much. And I want to thank you, not only for your time here today on the Spark Connect, but also all that you give us in learning and development, and all the cool stuff and insight and guidance that you provide all the time. You are just wonderful, and I appreciate you. And I know that our listeners do too.
well, thank you so much.
That's your spark. Now go light something up. And hey, if this episode lit you up, share it with a friend, a fellow facilitator, or someone who needs a little more connection in their day. Be sure to follow the Spark Konnect so you don't miss what's next. We've got more brilliant voices, bold ideas, and heart-forward conversations coming your way. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and keep showing up.